Well, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. It looks like it's about 2 o'clock or 2 o'clock Central. So why don't we get started? My name's Steve Price, and I'm one of the co-editors of the Writing Center Journal. Michelle Yudice is one of our co-editors, and Carrie Jordan. And Carrie, I think, is going to be joining us a little bit later. And I think Michelle's got another obligation this afternoon. But we're real happy to have you here. These WCJ live sessions are one of the things we wanted to do to extend the reach of the journal. So one of the things that we thought as new editors when we started was we didn't want the journal just to be something that gets mailed out and set on people's shelves and kind of forgotten. And so there's always people behind these articles and participants and research, and there's a lot of life in those things. And so we wanted to try to connect readers with the authors and with the researchers. And so one of the people who have been with us since way before we took on the journal was Roberta Kjesrud, who we're real happy to have with us today, a past president of the IWCA, involved in the organization in so many different and influential ways. And we were just really excited when we had a submission from her. And part of the fascination of her article is the process that she and her tutors went through in researching it and writing it, and I'm sure she'll talk about some of that today as well. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Roberta, and if you want to say anything else about yourself and your position in your school, please do, and we'll let you get started. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, and thanks everybody else for being here too. It's nice not to be, I am talking alone in a room, but at least I'm talking to somebody, so it's great to see y'all out there, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, how you stumped me with your questions and stuff. So yeah, I'm at Western Washington University, and we have just opened our brand new research writing studio where we combine research support with writing support in a studio-based learning environment. I'll be talking a little bit more about that because although it's not the entire impetus for why we went that direction, part of it is based on this research for sure. So with that, I'm going to begin by giving a slight overview of the article because I know not everyone has had a chance to read it, and so I just want to give 3-4 minutes of overview, and then for those of you who have read it, I'm going to try to keep it from being boring by telling you a little bit more about some of the findings of the original research which didn't make it into the article. So I do have some slides here, and I'm going to begin sharing my desktop now, so I will go away temporarily, which is probably a relief to us all.
Roberta, as you do that, can I chime in real quick? I should have mentioned we also have a chat box, and if you would prefer to ask questions or make comments or carry on some side conversations in the chat box, that's probably located on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can access that there. I'll try to keep an eye on it and forward some questions to Roberta, and she'll keep an eye on that too. So that's another way that we can engage in some communication here.
So because I have two screens, can you tell me which one you're seeing?
That's your title.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because there's a lovely photo of my staff on the other screen. They'd be really good to see too. But okay, so here I am with my title, and now I'm advancing my slides. Which worked before. What? Okay. Let me see. There we go. Aha!
There we go.
All right, so here's the article in a nutshell. We started researching the role of both writers and tutors' deep thinking questions in Writing Center dialogues. Our research team comprised 3 undergraduates and me. We sought to identify the cognitive outcomes for both writers and tutors as evidenced over dialogic sequences through a corpus of 30 transcripts. We intended to classify questions using a taxonomy modified by Thompson and Makowitz, original to Grazer in person. This was meant to be replicated research to some degree, but and here's where the data threw us under the bus. We epically failed to apply the existing taxonomy because it simply didn't allow us to account for the complexities in the data. So we kept running into things that didn't fit. And so then you have choices about whether you're going to ramrod something through or whether you're going to adjust the taxonomy, which we did many, many, many times. And we still found stuff that just didn't fit. And so at some point, we just kind of pulled the plug on it. We analyzed 30 transcripts, but we didn't complete. I think we used a finally modified taxonomy. We coded using that taxonomy 3 of the 30 transcripts where we came to an agreement of at least 90% inter-rater reliability, but we gave up on the rest of them because we just felt that the data was still screaming at us and that we weren't happy with the taxonomy. So we felt like this was a failed research project, and we're stunned to figure out what to do with ourselves given that we had spent so much time on it. And then there was this kind of moment where we all said, but we actually think we know some stuff that we didn't know before. And so how can we redeem this thing? And basically we're prompted by our failure to reconsider the entire theoretical lens that we had been using to study questions. And then we started reaching outside our field, only to discover that there are many fields that research questions in entirely different ways. So questions are a part of practice anywhere from your attorney to your police force to your medical professions to your helping professions. And so fortunately, they've been well studied in these other disciplines and provide lots of alternate lenses through which to view them. And interestingly, all of those other lenses had moved way beyond the directive, non-directive binary, which was such a relief. Eventually then when it came down to what am I going to do with this information, it resulted in this article, which is a real meta-analysis of the study itself, where I suggest strategies that researchers and research readers can use to be sensitive to lower bias and really reduce it in future research. It's became a kind of an activist piece for me. I don't know if that comes through, but I am going to carry that activism through today in today's session because I want to shake things up. So you've been warned.
Excellent.
Did anybody leave? No. So just for those of you that kind of wonder about the original study, we did have some preliminary findings that we felt were relatively robust, although we wouldn't actually make big claims because obviously we didn't finish everything exactly the way we would have wanted to. But what we did notice is that deep thinking questions do prompt higher order thinking moves as per Bloom's revised taxonomy. And I think this would be a very promising field of study for the Writing Center world, since we're always trying to figure out how to prove that we are effective. The fact that there are cognitive outcomes that are demonstrable through Writing Center dialogues is pretty exciting. But the confound here is that there were lots of other strategies that prompted higher order thinking moves, including silence, imperatives, deliberately incomplete utterances, which was huge in our data and has never been mentioned in Writing Center research before. I don't know why, other than we got this whole, well, the binary is working for us. Mm-hmm. Then when writers fail to successfully complete higher order cognitive moves as prompted by the tutors actually often fail to scaffold the move that they originally prompted. But the compound to this is that writers often demonstrated the ability to scaffold themselves, which then in turn re-engaged the tutors to collaborate in the scaffolding process. We thought this is a really interesting observation. It would obviously need to be better studied, but it concerned us for our own tutor education that tutors failed to successfully scaffold at times, which you will see had huge implications for our tutor education. And then we also noticed that tutors most often pose the kinds of questions suggested by tutoring manuals. And so all the prescriptions regarding the kinds of questions that tutors should ask as the most useful. Tutors are picking that up, and that's the ones that they're asking. But there were lots of other question types suggested by other disciplines that were not being used. For instance, hypothetical questions. We noticed in the data that tutors didn't often push writers to go meta, and hypothetical questions have a lot of power to do that. They're using other fields to help people go meta on their process. And so we noticed that gap in the data and thought it kind of scared us, because it seems to me that our tutoring manuals are actually prescribing and limiting the choices that tutors have in the kinds of questions that they ask. And then in terms of writer questions, which has also, to my knowledge, never been studied in writing centers before, writing center research, which I find completely baffling, is like, they're there too, hello. So writers posed far fewer questions than tutors did. The vast majority of writer post questions called for tutors to evaluate, like, how's my thesis, or what do you think of my conclusion? And then the interesting thing here is that when requested to evaluate, tutors returned evaluative responses only 25% of the time. 75% of the time they diverted to something else with really interesting strategies, which is probably the next interesting finding. At no time did tutors go meta to acknowledge that they were uncomfortable with an evaluative role. At no time did they explicitly negotiate or renegotiate a role other than evaluative. And so we noticed that tutors demonstrated a variety of really creative and unusual strategies to avoid evaluating. But anyway, it was actually got kind of amusing. And this, if there was something that would draw me back into question research, which I'm admittedly a bit tired of right now, this would be certainly it, because I want to know what's going on there. That's really, it's not surprising to me that writers would ask us to evaluate. The surprising thing is that tutors don't know how to get out of it. So in terms of implications, we've gone lore-free in lots of ways. I'm calling it lore-free because I didn't know what else to call it. In tutor education, that's the most immediate, I think, application of this research for me. So we currently avoid all material that reference the directive, non-directive continuum. It's just poison to me now, and so it doesn't make the cut in terms of readings. We specifically articulate learning outcomes, which we didn't before, and I can't imagine how bad of a director I must have been not to have done that before. And then we also explicitly instruct the revised Bloom's taxonomy, so that tutors can make choices about the level of cognitive move that they're asking writers to make. Because you can't use good scaffolding strategies if you don't know how to avoid writers' failure. So when writers fail to answer the prompt that tutors give them, it loses face for everyone, the tutor and the writer. And writers, writing assistants, or we call them that, tutors didn't know how to repair that failure at times or to restore face to the writer. So we try to instruct specific strategies to avoid failure, but then also teach strategies to repair that failure when writers do fail, both repair the affect and the cognition. And then we also specifically instruct strategies to renegotiate roles. So when someone tries to push you into an evaluative role and you're not comfortable with it, how can you name that discomfort, pass it back to the writer as, you know what, that's not going to help here because I'm not the ultimate evaluator. I don't want to be in this role. Given that I don't want to be in this role, what do I want to be instead? What will help you instead? That sort of meta-awareness that we're not judge and jury on people's writing. So, I feel like I've talked kind of nonstop here. I could really blow your minds with the program pedagogy. We threw out a lot of other lore, We don't emphasize one-to-one anymore. We don't do appointment-based sessions very much anymore. We don't read drafts aloud, whole drafts aloud anymore. We've switched to studio-based learning practices. Sorry about my phone. I didn't think about that. And there's some features of our studio-based learning there that you can also see. Now, I'm going to open it to you because I've talked for a while. I have one more slide. It's a question for you, but you can pose some for me right now.
While I'm reading some of these, could you say a little bit more about the no longer emphasizes one-to-one tutoring?
Yeah. Well, so one thing about the one-to-one is that writers come in one at a time to meet with you one at a time. And we just wanted to throw the doors open and get writers to actually write with us. So at any given time, there are 20 writers in the studio typically that are writing. And when they're in process, they might need you for a short intervention. And that tends to be one-to-one, but we've had really great success with also saying, hey, gee, there's 3 other people in here from your class. Did you know that? Because you're all working on the same assignment. Want to form an ad hoc group and help each other. And, so that's these kind of small groups are springing up. Or someone will overhear and go, hey, I'm in that class and I'm a little farther along. You want some help? So it kind of authorizes students to help one another rather than, it doesn't have to be us that is sponsoring the learning. I mean, we're sponsoring it by sponsoring the space, but so yeah. Does that help?
It does, and I just wanted to draw some attention to that because it's exciting stuff. There's some questions in the chat box. David Stock just said that he and some of his tutors were doing a similar research project that they presented at NCPTW last weekend using the Makowitz and Thompson coding scheme, and they had some of those same struggles inserting things, identifying and classifying questions that you did. And so he can kind of feel your pain.
Yeah, I didn't know that, David. That's interesting. Well, I'm glad there's plenty of pain to go around.
And then some questions. Karen asks, what do you mean by studio-based learning practices?
Right. So I think there's some indications of what that is. So in a studio, there's studios across disciplines, but predominantly in art, in dance, in architecture, in engineering and design. They feature studio-based learning. The idea is that you come and work on your craft in the space, and that when you need, for instance, in a design studio, you'll have a mini charrette where people will gather around, look at your design and go, that doesn't look usable, or this is going to be an issue. I really love this, love that color, go more there. And then there's an immediate response to revising. So it's not uncommon for people to camp out in the studio for 4 to 6 hours. I mean, maybe that's a little bit unusual, but 2 to 3 hours is not at all unusual. And then during that time, we don't meet with them for a half an hour at a time. We just work on incrementally getting them to the next step that they need to be on. So where are you now? What's your goal? What kind of information or strategy do you need to get there? I'm going to talk with you for 10 minutes, model this strategy, and then turn you loose on your own. Call me back if you're having trouble. So there's much more movement. It's busy. Yeah. Does that answer it, Lucy?
I think.
Oh no, that's Karen. Sorry. Lucy asks about strategies for repairing scaffolding. Karen, if you have a follow-up, well, let's see. What was it particular about your findings that led you to move away from one-to-one and appointment-based sessions? Well, I don't think that there's anything particular to these findings other than I became very sensitized to how my thinking was influenced by our lore. And the lore of one-to-one is, it's like a fundamental principle in writing center pedagogies. So once you're willing to to throw out directive, non-directive. It sort of opens the door for you to throw out other lore. And I guess I don't throw it out just for the fun of throwing something out, but it like testing it. And so testing it against other disciplines. One thing that's always bothered me about one-to-one is it's very one at a time. So we drag people in, meet with them, and then send them out to go do stuff. And we give them everything that they're going to need that, along the way to get them to a perfect, or not a perfect paper, but a better paper. Well, if anybody's gone the old-fashioned way, you've gone to the gas station to get directions for something, and after the second turn, I'm already lost again. I feel like that's kind of what we were doing to folks before. And so I was looking for other ways to approach things. And that's what the willingness to go outside the discipline, to cast aside that maybe it doesn't need to be one-to-one. Maybe I want my writing center to be a really, really busy place with lots of people in it. What would it take? Are there other models where that's the case? And so I don't think there's any explicit findings from this study. It's more, how did it shake me up to be open to other practices? Lucy asked what strategies we use for repairing scaffolding. So I'm actually really interested in learning more. If you have ideas for me, please let me know. But right now, what we're doing is by looking at the revised Bloom's taxonomy, which if I was daring enough to change my screen here, maybe I would be, I could actually send the link or something to you. My colleagues here, Kelly, could you send the link out in the chat box? We engage that taxonomy, and then talk about ways that if you're prompting writers to create new knowledge and they failed at that, how far down the scale do you need to back up? So maybe you can get them to talk about some concepts that they're understanding from their course. Then maybe you can get them to apply those concepts. So now you're moving them back up the scale, but incrementally. So right now, the most common strategy is to back down the taxonomy until you get to the writer's comfort level, and then begin pushing them up one step at a time rather than 3 steps at a time. And so that's one of the things we noticed, is that writing assistants would plunge into, so what's the connection between these 2 main pieces of your, or themes in your paper? Oh gosh, that's a huge question. You're asking a lot in terms of a cognitive move. But if you can back that up a little bit, and it's like, tell me about this concept. Tell me about this concept. If you were applying this concept, and then sort of moving, okay, we're analyzing that concept. Are there key features of those concepts that seem similar to you? So that's what I would mean by repair.
And if you want to chime in and talk, please do. You can just unmute yourselves. There's no problem with that. And don't forget the chat box too. We have some good questions popping up there, including the revised Bloom taxonomy link has been posted there. Andrea asked, how did faculty outside the Writing Center receive the move away from the one-to-one approach? And maybe even add to that, how have students perceived it? Are they used to that sort of thing? Do you need to help them adapt?
Yes, you need to help everyone adapt. So far, the faculty don't seem to be alarmed about it. At least we haven't heard from anybody who is. And in fact, lots of faculty are, well, not lots, but several faculty have brought their classes into the studio during class time for them to write in the studio and receive assistance while they're there. So I'm thinking that seems like evidence that they're embracing this. Students, for the most part, are really early adopters. But there are a few people that might say, but change it back. We've probably had 2 specific complaints that have reached my ears about that. Like, I want you to edit with me. And so far, one person I never really, it reached my ears, but I didn't get to talk to them directly. The other person, we have agreed to keep in dialogue about it. She is going to try it with another paper, and we're going to try negotiating, like, let's try it this way, then see, have you evaluate what's not working for you as well as it did before. And given that we can't go back, how can we go forward? So is there something that we can do to accommodate your learning style that we're not doing now? So I really want to learn from people who don't necessarily embrace it. But boy, students, I mean, they took it like fish to water. One thing about it is we were busy from the first day, really. You know, for the first 3 weeks of a quarter system, we sat around and talked to each other in the past, just sort of waiting for someone to come in. But early in this venture, students were coming in, they tell me, I'm coming in because I've got a project later and I want to build a habit of working here now so that when I am ready to start, I'll, you know, it's a habit and you all know me.
I love it.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to feed that cereal for everyone. What's in the water? Can I put it in everyone's water? Let's see. Karen, moving to the studio influence your record keeping? Do you collect data about who's using? Do you record information about what is discussed with the students? Is information shared with the instructor? Well, that's a lot of questions there. So we, yeah, obviously it's to influence our record keeping. It's a lot more complicated. We keep a space log of how many people are actually in the space as one kind of data, and then we also log people in and out when we do an interaction, which gets to be a little bit of a pain if you're having 6 or 7 interactions over a 3-hour period, and you have to keep asking them to log. And so we also have a new system for logging that instead of putting it on one shift manager, everyone logs. And it turns out this isn't so popular. So we have a lot of uncollected data now, about 7 weeks in. We're finding this out. So I don't know, we have more to do there. If anybody's got a perfect data collection system, please let me know, because I don't think there is such a thing. We're using a homegrown thing right now. We have a notes field where we can talk about what's been discussed, mainly because creating a handoff, I think I'm going to stop sharing this actually in a moment. Creating some kind of handoff between tutors over a period of 3 hours is also challenging, and having a notes log like we did this to this point is kind of helpful, but we're very imperfect at it at the moment. We've never shared information with instructors. We share it with students who are free to share it with instructors if they would like. So this isn't really a change to our situation.
Sometimes related to that, people ask about year-end reports and, you know, number-based decisions to dean and administrators. Does it have any impact on that?
Oh, I'm sure it will. I mean, the fact that we're, you know, in process of getting everybody comfortable with logging data, and it's all changed. I mean, at least when you spend an hour with someone, you spent an hour with someone. If you spend 10 minutes and get the person what they need, it doesn't look as good because they only needed you for 10 minutes. So am I concerned about that? No, not at all. I mean, we have 20 times more traffic.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty compelling. So even if you are not specifically intervening in whatever outcome is happening for that student at that very moment, I mean, they're building relationships with you. And so, you know, I've had students say, hey, see you tomorrow. You know, this never, ever happened before. I think it will be relatively easy to demonstrate that we've changed the culture and that there's got to be some learning going on. I mean, they're not just, some people come for lunch, but very seldom. The learning outcomes we articulate, yes, absolutely. So we articulate cognitive, affective, and agency outcomes. But those are the big categories. So cognitive outcomes, we're obviously looking for some kind of move in cognition up the taxonomy. Affective outcomes, we're looking for the kind of motivation that someone needs to continue to feel invested in a project. And maybe even to be a place where your struggles are affirmed as, yeah, this bites. So that's actually really interesting. Most of our tutors really want to get to business. They don't want to spend a lot of time. And so we've seen plenty of evidence in the transcripts that big, gaping, affective concerns go unresponded to. So we're really doing some repair work in our tutor education this year about that. So you can't just, when someone says, I've turned this in twice and I've gotten negative feedback from my professor who says I can't write my way out of a paper bag, you can't just say, yeah, what about that conclusion? I mean, that just is not. So we're doing some repair work with that now. And then the third thing I think is really obvious in our pedagogy, agency. So do I have enough strategies in my process to be able to manage this on my own? Do I know what to do next when I'm stuck? Or can I imagine a way? So the strategy that you're teaching me now, where would I use that and how in the future? So we, our tutor education isn't perfect by any means, but we're definitely addressing those specifically articulated outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lucy, I know. I think maybe because we've already also gone to studio-based learning pedagogies, I think the binary is not as relevant to us anymore. Maybe I'll develop a certain piece with it as a part of our history that I can embrace and be happy that it served as a springboard for me. But right now I'm kind of mad at it, so I just don't want to. I want to unpack it and let it go. And I don't know if this is saying something about John. I don't know how he deals with it anymore either, because certainly he's taken a different theoretical path too. I just think scaffolding is so much more helpful that it's kind of irrelevant to me now. It's just me. I'm not saying that should be your approach. I really don't know, but for me. Yes, we speak to the students about outcomes. In fact, we added a session to our syllabus this year about outcomes. So it did come either I think it came before agenda setting, but it was sequentially related to agenda setting. So, and we didn't just do it right up front either. We kind of revisited the topic halfway through when, so in our center, people observe for 3 weeks. And once they started actually conducting their own sessions, then we revisited outcomes to make sure that their benchmark for success, they have kind of criteria. Instead of that, it used to be all, did it feel good? And if it felt good, then it was success. But now it's, I don't know, everyone wants that feel good moment. So I don't think that feeling good about a session is off the table. I just think that it's more complicated than that, and people can unpack it a little bit more and say, oh, just feeling good isn't quite enough. The role of student questions in sessions. Yeah. So as I said, I'm kind of sick of questions right now, but if there was anything that could draw me back in, it would be students' questions. So here's what I think right now. I'm just suspecting. I don't think students actually pose as many questions as they have. And that there's something, there's something about the power relationship there that's a little bit too close to classroom setting. I think what happens is that students come in with sort of an overarching question mark hanging over their head, like, I don't get this, or I don't know where to go with this, or so it's not articulated in any specific way, but what people come in with is a question. It's just that they haven't said aloud to themselves what that question is. I think that's the more important question than the ones that they actually ask in the session, but I don't know for sure, and I don't know how to get at that. Got any ideas, John? Yeah, I wish you did too. Yeah, I don't think it, so we think that too, that students often don't know what their questions are, and sometimes we sort of have to help them ask the question. But this is all just really impressionistic. I don't know this for a fact. I would love to study it more. David, listen to exploratory, descriptive, yeah, no kidding. What other paradigms have you been seeing or considering? Well, yeah, I think the next question that we sort of undertook after this was the relationship between space and learning. And so it's really interesting if you take that question to the Writing Center literature. You get really different kinds of stuff than if you take it to the literature in higher education in general. And so I think maybe one thing that I have changed my practice in terms of when I'm investigating something because I don't know or don't understand or want to figure it out, my process now is to figure out what other fields are asking these same kinds of questions and go there. Not to say that I go there exclusively, but it's only a springboard now just to maybe start with some Writing Center stuff, but that it has to be triangulated elsewhere for me to really feel like I've got, that I know something. Does that get at your question, David? Yeah, okay, good. What do tutors do during times when nobody is asking for feedback? Personal writing that students want to keep private. How is your physical space set up? Well, so yeah, maybe I can flash to a picture or two. Let me see if I can multitask and get you a picture here, if I can figure out how to close this out. Because space really does affect so the relationship between space and pedagogy, I always thought that you could make any pedagogy work in any space. And I don't think that at all anymore. It's way more complicated than that. Let's see. So I'm trying to talk and do something at the same time, which is always the recipe for disaster. And let's see. Keep eye on student. Well, so keeping an eye on students is we had some trouble with that for sure at first, and then we developed this. We started using a table tent system like restaurants use, and they're like, you've seen those little flip menus in restaurants, maybe not. So they're sitting on the table, and there's a little flip, and then you look at the drinks, and then you look at the hors d'oeuvres, and then you look at well, in our case, they flip from, I'm not working on anything right now, just leave me alone. And then I'm working on something research writing related, but I don't need your help right now. And then they flip to another one that says, yeah, I'm stuck. I have a question. And so that helps us to kind of look at the room. And if there's a green light, that tells us that they're stuck and need something from us right now.
So the writers, are they pretty good then about sort of updating their status that way?
No, not always. And that's actually a really interesting question. Like, what do we do about the fact that so there was one day that I was in the studio, and there was two students that had just been in a workshop that I'd given, and I knew they had questions, but I asked them, and they said, "Oh, no, we're just working." And so I kept coming by and asking them, do you have any questions? No, don't have any questions. Well, then I learned that that's really just, terrible approach. So I just sat down with them and said, okay, so what are you working on right now? And then all these questions came up. So I revisited them 5 times, and they never had any questions. But every time I spent at least 10 to 15 minutes with them, answering their questions that they didn't have. So, red cup, cool. I'm still looking for the physical space, and I'm getting closer. And I have pictures, and I have a panoramic shot right now that I don't know how it's going to appear. Let's see. Okay. And so now I shall screen share.
Roberta, this is a new space, right?
It is, yeah.
Did you design it with this approach in mind?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Is it showing?
Mm-hmm, it is.
Okay.
It's big.
Yeah, it is. And we have to expand. We're at capacity already. So we're 7 weeks in, and there's already an active plan to expand into 2 additional. It'll probably about double the footprint.
Wow.
I know. Yeah.
You're getting some good reactions. Shireen's
Definitely.
beautiful, and John, what a great space. The Northwest Writing Center. This is so awesome. She loves the design.
So I actually have one more question for you in my PowerPoint. And so I think it's time. It's time to bring it on you. But I've lost my PowerPoint now that I shared that. Of course. Okay.
How many tutors are there at one time, Roberta?
Well, we combined with research as well. So there's usually one person that's a research specialist, and then probably 3 writing specialists.
Okay.
One of the things that's an interesting situation is now we're starting to have to kind of figure out, well, actually, what if we answered other questions? So sometimes there's people reading their coursework. Sometimes there's people working on accounting. What if we just helped them think through their accounting? Does it have to be? So we're kind of wondering, where does it stop? And does it need to? And yes, we'll always be writing specialists, but the truth is that we're a pedagogy more than anything else. And so I think the pedagogy just applies in so many places. It's hard to imagine where this could stop. And then I get scared and think, oh, but yeah. Anyway, let's see. Thanks for your good comments. Let's see. Kurt says, how has the open concept floor design affected tutoring methodologies across the different groups who share the space? Well, there's just two research and writing that shares a space right now, so it's not a lot. Oh, and there was a other question about what if they want private. We were just talking about this other day. We don't have any capacity to be private in here, and in actual fact, it's a lot less difficult to establish privacy in a space that's a going concern than it is when there's only 2 or 3 people that are working on the writing at the same time, because you can hear every word, whereas here I dare you to listen in on another conversation. So in the same way that you go to a coffee shop and you can have a really intimate conversation because everybody's paying attention to their own thing and there's so much background buzz, no one can really hear you. Privacy is actually relatively easy to establish. What we do need, and we have plans in the future dimension here, is to create some focus areas for people with learning differences that need a little bit less hubbub. So that's the next phase. And then now my what if question to you. I feel like everyone has had sort of their heretical thoughts at some point about writing center lore. And I just wonder what would happen if we went there sometimes. And if we dared to follow those thoughts, weren't scared by them, but just followed them. And maybe we would set our heretical thoughts to rest and be totally comfortable with lore. And maybe other times we'd be shaken up a little bit more. But I just wonder what would happen in writing center studies. How would the research context change for us? What questions would you be asking that you haven't quite dared ask?
They're great questions.
Silence in the room. Oh no.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm not tenured, so that's interesting. I'm not faculty either. When can we start calling tutors teachers?
Yeah.
Later this afternoon, as far as I'm concerned.
That's a great question.
Asking more questions about learning and impact. Carrie, say more.
Carrie might be typing. Can you say something?
I was about to type and then I decided I could just unmute my microphone and talk.
That'd be nice.
I have a little cold, so I sound a little stuffy, but I've been really interested for lots of years now at our fear of assessment, for one thing, right? Like in this resistance to the idea that a student might actually leave with a better piece of writing, right? And I think that's been one of the pieces of lore that has been truly crippling for us, that we would say better writers, not better writing, in this sort of self-protective way, right? Like if that's our mantra, then we can't be held accountable. And so I'd really like to see us investigate in what ways does writing improve, right? Even within a 30-minute session, what are some transferable skill pieces that are maybe starting to be built? And, what can we see in that text that is evidence of that person's learning? And so that's what I think maybe would be my direction if I were to think about the outside of lore, right? The heretical things. I'd like to consider that more.
It doesn't seem very heretical, if you don't mind my saying.
No, I know, right? You've been saying that same thing for as long as I've known you, Roberta, right? But man, go pick your conference. And you know what I mean? Like listen to the conversations, and it's all about what we don't do and what we can't do, which is really unfortunate.
This is Shireen, a fellow heretic, chiming in. I have never had, student tutors. We've always had professional tutors, and that has never bothered me at all, because it seems to me that we can collaborate with students. We don't pretend to be peers. I think we're pretty comfortable with, we're the expert about writing and the writing process, and we've seen this assignment before, so we kind of know the rules of the game and academe, so we can, we have something to offer you, but we're not going to take over your paper. So it's always been interesting to me that somehow our lore says that only peers can collaborate, and I think we collaborate just fine, and we don't have to take on that cloak of peerness to be successful in my book.
Well, there's no such thing anyway. It's all just a ruse.
Right?
Yeah, I had a graduate tutor say, it seems pretty disingenuous to me to pretend that I'm a peer with an undergraduate student who's struggling with their paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and the same is true for undergraduate peer tutors. It's the same. It's disingenuous for them to say that they don't have expertise, because we wouldn't have hired them if they hadn't. Yeah, I actually did something really heretical. I don't know if it's a good thing that I did or not. I'm working with a graduate student who isn't quite getting the concept of synthesis in a literature review. And I took one of his paragraphs and rewrote the whole thing and showed it, gave it back to him and said, this here thing with your material, this is what I would do if I were synthesizing it. Now you take it and apply it to the rest. I don't know how it's worked yet, but that was like, we don't do the work for them. Well, there I did. I would call that modeling, Kurt. Thank you. But it was definitely much more hands-on than I've ever been before.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it can be a really effective way of helping writers see how the sort of more abstract academic concepts can get translated into their own work. But I think maybe the heretical part might be is if we would encourage that among peer tutors and student-to-student work. Certainly they'd have some exposure about, depending on the policies, about plagiarism at that point, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose that's true. I've introduced that as a risk for this character or this guy that I'm working with too, but he's not actually going to use my paragraph except as it's instructive to him. I left stuff that I didn't know conceptually and glossed that, so he's going to have to do something with it, I think. But yeah, that could be, maybe that's where that fear comes from. Is there any question that I haven't totally answered? Or Shireen, sorry I cut you off there.
I was just going to say, it seems to me that it's only in teaching writing that we constrain ourselves so much. I don't know in any other skill where the coach isn't free to jump in from time to time and say, no, do it like this. No, that's not the right way. Do it like this. And I'm not saying that every other type of teaching is better than ours, but it seems that they may be freer to try different things as they're working with students. And anyway, I think it's interesting how writing pedagogy seems to differ so much from so many other types of pedagogies.
We started I'm sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to, before we lose track of some of these, you really started something here, Roberta, with different questions people are raising about calling them tutors, the importance of lower order concerns. John raised a question about the human cognition processes,
Yes.
how we learn, different things we can look at.
I don't know about you, but I think Writing Center research would be a ton more fun to read if you all explored those things. Get out there, people.
Yeah, she's like, did you have non-directive and directive? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not bad. It's good. It's just an interesting conversation. I actually know that guy, okay. You're okay if you're going to come back. He's good. He's at this. But anyway,
I'm really struggling to hear you, Kimberly.
nobody's from Learning Center. Everybody's from Learning Center. No.
Steve, could you hear Kimberly?
Just barely.
Yeah, I know.
Was she talking to us?
Oh, maybe. Oh, maybe so.
We start bombing in 5 minutes.
I wasn't supposed to hear it.
Okay. Unmute. Okay, I muted her again. John raises he said about Shireen, a good point. Is this in part because of the romantic notion of voice that might be a kind of legacy we've inherited from English departments?
Mm-hmm. Sure could be. Or, I mean, an alternate explanation is plagiarism one, or, I mean, there's any number of explanations. This obviously seems like it would really be a fruitful line of inquiry.
So why the reluctance, do you think, Roberta, to pursue some of these? Like, it seems like there's, at least at the journal, like people just want the permission, and you have to give them a lot of permission to move outside of this orthodoxy, this is what we believe. And if it's almost like if you don't speak that party line,
Yeah.
you'll get ostracized or something. Where do you think that comes from in writing centers?
I don't know. I've wondered about it myself. Yeah, it's fear-based to my way of thinking, but I don't actually know if that's an answer, because fear of what, I guess.
Right.
And then maybe it's a little pride-based too. Like we have a corner on something and this is what makes us unique. It sets us apart. We can't give that part of our identity up, because then we would be just like every other teacher, and ooh, that doesn't seem so special anymore. I don't know. I'm not sure. Anybody else have any speculations? What do you think, Steve?
That resonates with me, the identity. I mean, it's always been so much of what we've struggled with or tried to promote. What is a writing center? And where are we located and what's our role? And we spend so much time as a discipline trying to come to terms with that, to understand what it is that we do and what does make us unique. And so to give that up, I think you're onto something there.
I think it may be too, this is Shireen, that if we have an awkward space at our institutions that we're continually trying to define, if we can go to lore, if we can go to the Writing Center Journal and have it be more constrained and cozy and fewer variables, that maybe there's some comfort there.
Yeah, well, and it is uncomfortable. I mean, Rosemary, my dear colleague here in the Pacific Northwest, is saying this is scary, and yeah, I think it is scary. It's like, what if maybe we would throw the baby out with the bathwater? It's risk taking, but I think those kinds of intellectual risks we need to take, and then once we've taken them and followed them to the end, and either said, you know what, it's not what I was thinking, it's a little more of this other thing, then I think you settle with some kind of certainty that your identity is maybe less external and more internal. So I don't know, you've settled something. I think when I've been uncertain about something and stick to the party line just because I'm supposed to, it's actually scarier than, I don't know, maybe this is to mental health, self-help, walk into the fear, I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe it wasn't the greatest thing. How did you know that I was a particularly difficult baby? Could anyone have guessed that?
There's some great responses here. David raised the issue from Jackie's McKinney about the constant beginners and that foundation, the scariness of it, the work of something new.
Well, yes, that's true. And I will talk about this intellectual work to anybody who wants to listen. It was hard. There were times when I was just like, what is wrong with me that I cannot make this work out? When scholars like Joe and Isabel have mastered it, and like, I don't know, it just, yeah, it was, there were moments. And then when my reviewers wanted me to go further, once I submitted to Writing Center Journal, I was like, okay, you don't understand. I am too stupid to take this further. I am done. I have no more intellect to give. So it is hard work, and it's this unsettling work.
Karen makes a good point here about the people's positions and contingent positions and that ability to take risks, perhaps. She phrased it as to participate in that research activities.
Well, I don't know of anyone much more contingent than me in a way. I mean, I'm here on sufferance. I have a professional position. They can fire me at any time for no cause whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
So it took me years to negotiate research and writing into my job description. I think I have a corner on marginality in a way when it comes to the professional position. I think risk-taking is not necessarily research-based. I'm definitely not advocating taking risks based on whims. I'm talking about taking intellectual risks in our research so that the questions we ask are risky questions. And then the research actually tells us something. I don't know if we've done that as a field. I really don't. I'm not convinced we've done that as a field.
So I know some people are having to start going, and I just wanted to say we can continue this, but Roberta, just thanks for sharing what you've been doing and clearly jump-starting some thinking here. And this, from the examples people are offering and the thinking I see going on in this chat box, I just encourage people who are still here to don't drop these questions. Think about them in your own writing centers. What would it look like, and how do we articulate these things and study them and present them to others? Roberta has given us a great example at her institution, and Writing Center Journal is always looking for these sorts of thoughtful, risk-taking new approaches. So please, let's try to work with some of these.
Well, I can hang out for a few more minutes if you like. I sure do. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I know Carrie's always interested in the assessment and the learning that's taking place, and she raised that here. Do you have any plans for, I guess, I'm sure you do, the studying of how the implications to this? Any research projects coming up?
Yeah, not as specific as I would like at this point. So one of the things about assessment, I think that I do now start to make a little bit more of a distinction between assessment and research, because assessment to me is about program improvement and research might not be. So right now it's so new, the program, that I think we're looking for a way in to what it is we want to assess. But one thing I think that will probably be next is a little bit more on space and learning, just because we now have a completely different space with some contrasts between a previously well-defined and enclosed space. So I don't exactly know how that's going to play out, but and we know that we need to do more to assess outcomes. I think actually I was surprised at how much the transcripts revealed about cognitive growth, and I was kind of actually not thinking of that as a methodology to necessarily prove cognitive growth when I started out, but I definitely think it is, not just drafts like Carrie was saying. I actually did that for my graduate work and looked at pre-post drafts after written feedback from faculty versus feedback from writing consultants. And I think maybe bringing all of that together might be really interesting. Like if you had a transcript of the session plus an artifact, I think that'd be really interesting. I might I can't imagine doing that on a broader scale, though. The other thing is that, I don't know if this is news you're interested in, but Jill Gladstein emailed me and said she couldn't be here today, but that the next phase of their Mellon grant is to begin a research exchange kind of database, like data set exchange or data set archive. And I think part of me is a little bit tired of doing things that are based only on our center, that I'd really like to see something cross-institutional. So I flirt with those ideas. I feel like I should get started on something else. Yeah, Kurt asked if I'm free to set my own agenda. Pretty much. I don't know why. But I don't have to do a lot with retention and grades, although I actually I don't know, can I just say that out loud? I'm not really that interested. I just don't know. Just like retention and grade, big deal. Maybe persistent, I mean, if you think of it as an outcome, persistence is a pretty cool outcome. Grades, yeah, I don't know. I was very grade motivated, but now I'm just not that into it. So personally, I think learning outcomes is speaks to higher administrators far more than we give them credit for, and that we think that all they care about is retention and grades, and I don't think that's true at all. So why? You have ideas? You want to push me somewhere? I need a push. Give me a push.
No, I'm a little bit in awe of people who've been able to work their position to allow them to pursue those angles. In one of my previous gigs, when the Writing Center was merged under a Learning Center umbrella, our data management was also pushed under their process, and we lost a tremendous amount of richness, a tremendous amount of data. In a bean counting kind of way, we went from tracking probably 40 metrics that we had defined internally to tracking 12 or 15 that were very demographic. So we couldn't talk anymore from the remnants, the evidentiary remnants of the session about what kinds of things had happened in it, what sort of questions people explored, where in the writing process even students came in.
Well, there's got to be other ways to get that, because there's no such thing as a perfect data gathering system. So then maybe you go to some other collection method. I mean, transcripts certainly aren't the only way to gather data, but there's a lot of richness in those. You wouldn't need too many to be able to, make a representative claim about what goes on in sessions. But yeah, I hear you. There's definitely lots of political pressures out there. It takes a while to, I mean, and now I'm old, so no one really messes with me that much.
Well, all right. Why don't we wrap this up, Roberta? Carrie and I wanted to thank you for the article and for the whole process that went into it, and now for raising some great questions, and I think you've really got people thinking here, so thank you.
Yeah, Roberta, like this was the most engaged chat box I think I've seen in a session like this, right? Like lots of really good questions and observations.
Thank you, John. It's partly was a great article because of you, and that's the truth. Yeah.
Thank you, Roberta. I enjoyed the session too. This was great.
Oh, did you? Great. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. It means a lot that you made the time. It really does.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thanks, John.
It was kind of lively, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was wonderful.
I think maybe I've been to these now. So I knew that I wanted to stir the pot. And I kind of figured from the past that there's a number of people that hadn't read the article. So I was hoping that maybe doing a recap would help with that. But yeah, very gratifying. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And you already know that I think you guys rule.
Well, this was, I mean, it was very thoughtful too. Like there was some really
Yeah,
thinking
right.
going on, I think.
Pushing us into some higher order thinking, Roberta Kjesrud.
Did I scaffold it?
Oh my gosh.
I think you did.
Yeah, it was going there for a while. I couldn't keep up. That was cool. All right, you guys. Well, Carrie, you're sick. What?
Yeah, just a little snippy, that little stuff people get. It's all right.
Is it?
Let's turn my screen on now. I'll let y'all see me now. Where is it?
It's what? What'd you say?
Yeah, right. I can't even talk. I said I'll turn my video.
There you are.
I was in the coffee shop this morning to meet with some students, and Steve came in and called me Paul Bunyan in my flannel shirt.
Oh, you got your flannel.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You guys are working from home right now.
And now I'm self-conscious about my appearance. Thanks, Steve. I'm kidding.
Well, you guys know that I'm going to come whining back to you for whatever thing comes next, right? You know that, right?
Well, that's what I was wondering, Roberta. Like, what's next? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, I really do want to do something with space and learning. I think we, you know, the 10 case studies, Writing Center, the 10 case studies of spaces. Like, whoa, how do we reduce this to X number of square feet per person, and this
And where are your chairs? Yeah.
and
right.
how many little cubicles and whatnot, you know, how in the world did we get there? And it hasn't really gone from there.
No.
So I'm not sure. Like, do you have a method for me? Could you just hand me a method? Because, I mean, wow, it's so different here, right? There's so much going on. There's so much movement. People are just busy.
Well, you know what, Roberta?
Oh,
I don't have a method, but I bet if you look into some other disciplines,
Yeah,
Road trip.
no kidding.
I bet
EduCause-
somebody's looked at this in some other areas.
Yeah, EduCause
Yeah.
is probably going to be my best. We've got, I mean, how can I not do this, right? Because we have a Zotero file with 65 articles in it. We've read from all over the world, Australia, and Australia, there are no slackers in the space and learning department. They got some great research out there. So
You know,
yeah,
there's
that's what I'm gonna have to do, borrow a method.
It's been a while, but there's a branch in communication that studies space, and there's something with movement, and so tracking movement like 24 hours in your center. Where are the people sitting? How long are they there?
Yeah.
So we have there's a shareware tool called Suma Assessment, and you can build these little things that go on your iPad, and then you click and see where everybody is in the room. And we've done that already. We've got data from before, and then we're collecting it now. So yeah, I mean, we're starting to figure out how to make it actionable, but right now I'm kind of, I don't know.
That's what jumped out at me. So you're saying, you have this 10-minute interaction, but the writer might be there for 2 hours.
Right.
So what are they doing in those 2 hours? We know it's something.
I know.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they come and camp, all their stuff and their food and they meet their peers there. I mean, everybody, the dreaded group paper. This has always bothered me. The group papers never come to the Writing Center before. They just never, but they're all out there being assigned.
Yeah.
And everybody hates them to a person. They hate them. So why aren't they in the Writing Center? So now they are. And it's interesting because there's lots of dysfunction in those groups. But yeah.
Kurt, you were going to say something a minute ago, I think.
Road trip. I mean, I think that's one of the research methodologies is get out and look at spaces, and maybe particularly spaces in new construction. Salem State, where I used to work, has a fairly new library, but they painted some of the study rooms with marker board walls, and students required, the learning curve was like none.
Zero.
They stuck markers there, and stuff would go up on the walls, and boy, in a writing center space, I tend to do a lot visually, graphically, color-wise. For me, writing is like little blocks, and I play and move them around. And when in the few occasions when I've been able to play in the space, really good things happen. But when you're working in a cubbyhole, you can't. But
right, yeah.
I think education tends to be. I think we're 10 to 15 years behind business in terms of thinking about a lot of things. There's still colleges trying to teach us what color our parachute is. How 90s, but I'm sure there are some, tremendous collaborative spaces at Google headquarters.
Oh, yeah. There's a company where...
Down the road from you.
Oh, my gosh. That's a really good idea, Kurt.
Yeah.
So there's a company that I've heard of. I can't remember the name of it right now because I'm middle-aged and forget everything. But they don't have offices. They have movable desks. You get to decide who you're going to move your desk next to for a while because you're going to team up, decide to collaborate on a project. There's just the open office, but not just an open office. It's my desk might be next to yours for a few weeks, Kurt, while we do something together, and then I'll move mine over to Steve because we've decided to do something together. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah. The idea of movement is more prominent, I think, in business than it is in writing centers. So you sit down at a table next to someone, right? And then you both get up at the same time, but you stay completely still while you do your thing. So now people are up at whiteboards all the time, or, people are moving around. So if they go get lunch, come back, they're eating, you come over, it's just like there's a traffic pattern where there never used to be. You just sit.
Right.
I don't think business works like that. That's a good thought. Road trip is always a good thought. Oh, Valve is the company. Thanks.
Valve.
I forgot that you were still listening, Kelly. Kelly's my assistant director. He's lurking too.
Yeah. There's a link too.
He's my memory, when I don't. Yeah, their handbook is really interesting because it's a really writing center oriented model. They don't know it, but yeah. Anyway, well, you guys, I got to run too, but it's really nice hanging out with you. And to
All
be
right,
continued,
thank
I
you,
hope.
Roberta. Kurt, thanks for coming.
Roberta, when you get ready to talk about your
Glad I
project,
could sneak in at the end.
let us know.
Okay, will do. Thanks for the encouragement. You get better, okay?
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Roberta.
Bye.